Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see everyone here today. I call this March 14th, 2024 Jacksonville Water and Sewer Advisory Committee meeting to order. Mr. Hart, we have a quorum.
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda items for today? All right. So we got
Motion to.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda adopted. Has everyone had a chance to review the last meeting's minutes? Are there any omissions or corrections? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to accept the minutes as written.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes approved. All right, again, I'd like to welcome everyone here for today's meeting. It's a nice day outside. And saying that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Hassel.
Good evening, board. We have a continuation of our capital improvement plan discussion. Tonight we'll go over the changes that we've made and give you a look at our rate model. And then in the end, we'll ask you for your recommendation to City Council. So like I said, tonight, we're just gonna kind of do a quick recap. We didn't print you a new book or anything like that. There's basically 5 or 6 project changes. I'll discuss each one of those, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. But I didn't feel it was necessary to print you a full new book for just those few changes. So real quickly, just to recap, you know, the capital improvement plan is a 10-year planning document. We use it for setting rates, which is what our customers pay every month for their water and sewer usage. And we use it for setting system development fee payments, which are where developers or builders buy into the system for the capacity that's been constructed. So that's basically the financial piece, the financial purpose of the capital improvement plan. We also use it to prepare for growth so that we make sure that, you know, we're in good standing with the state. You know, in the 2007-8 timeframe, the city was under a special order by consent, which means we had very limited sewer that we could give out. And if you remember, during that time frame, Jacksonville was growing like crazy. And we really weren't prepared for the development that the city was seeing. And a great example of that is actually Carolina Plantation right across Ramsey Road. We did not have the sewer capacity to serve that development. So they constructed their own plant. So we use this document to help prepare so that we meet the demands of growth. In addition to that, we have existing water and sewer infrastructure that requires rehabilitation. So we use this document to also plan. So that's really the purpose of the capital improvement plan. In order to be a capital improvement project, the project needs to take 12 months or more to complete. The cost has to exceed $50,000, and it has to have a useful life of more than 5 years, and not be fleet, computer, equipment, those kind of things. It's really geared toward projects. And while we only talk about the water and sewer projects with this group, because you're the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, it also includes projects for police and fire and recreation and parks, and even community development. So it's a comprehensive document for the entire city. The biggest change that you'll see in just a minute goes with that maintenance piece that you see. In going through our useful life determination and policy, it came to light that some of the things that we had in our CIP were really more of an operation and maintenance item than they were a capital project. So they were a capital project, but because they didn't extend the useful life of whatever asset it was, it's really not a project that can be capitalized. Did I say that correctly? So it doesn't mean it's not a project. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to be done. It just means it doesn't go in this document. And I'll discuss a couple of those with you. But a great example would be a roof replacement. Matter of fact, that's the example that Sabrina gave to me, where we have, parks and recreation buildings where we had programmed roof replacements at the year that we would need to do them. We still need to do them, but really that's an ongoing O&M type item, an operation and maintenance type item. That's not you're adding, a new fire bay or a new, parks and recreation, day area or anything like that. You're not adding to the building, you're maintaining it. So that's probably the biggest change from the last draft that we gave you. So one of the things that we did do is, I've showed this to City Council before, I really haven't shown it to you, but we have a total of 116 projects in the capital improvement plan. That includes all that we just talked about, all city projects, not just water and sewer, for a total of $125 million. Here's the projects related to water and sewer. You can see that we have 55 total projects, so just about half of the projects are water and sewer related projects. And we have 16 in FY25. And you can see at the bottom, those are the goals that those projects support. So the biggest one is easily sustainable infrastructure, right? Whether that is rehabilitation of existing infrastructure or adding capacity to our system for future growth. One of council's key goals is that sustainable infrastructure. And then of course, public safety, because, I hate to say it, while I love the fire department, it'd be hard to fight fires without water. So, it comes back to, we work very closely with the fire department and others when we are, evaluating line sizes and hydrant spacing. And matter of fact, one of the projects that we have in the CIP is largely because of hydrant spacing or fire protection. So, and that is an area where it may not be a direct correlation right off the top. What do you mean by public safety? But, without that piece, it would make it more difficult. And then of course, downtown redevelopment. We have several projects that are partially funded with water and sewer. Newbridge Street is a great example of that, where we are replacing the, infrastructure that's reached the end of its useful life. We're seeing a lot of problems with that infrastructure, but we're also pairing it with a larger project where we're redeveloping downtown, resurfacing streets, putting in medians or streetscape or anything like that. And then of course, economic growth, making sure that we plan for the future of the city. So the big changes that you have, that you would notice from the last time we presented the CIP, probably the biggest is the Parkwood Regional Pump Station. That project is currently underway. The second contract was actually bid today. So it's out on the street now and it'll close generally in 4 to 5 weeks. But the biggest thing is, over the past year, council took the ARP funding, which was the American Rescue Plan funding that had been dedicated to this project. It was roughly $9 million. And when some of the use for that project, so the use for that funds were, some of the requirements were adjusted, they realized they could use it for general funds, so they moved that money over to support general fund. And then under instruction, the way to replace that funding would be with revenue bonds. And that shows in our model, and when that was presented to City Council, they did review the model. So Sabrina will be able to talk about that when you see her piece. And then Brinson Creek Pump Station and Main Pump Station were new for FY25, but they were maintenance activities. What we were doing in those is replacing pump rails. The rails are metal, they're stainless, but stainless, is not rust proof or corrosion proof. So over the years, we've had problems with those pump rails, those motor seats. It included a little bit of electrical and some other updates. But again, that's not extending the life of the station. It's maintaining that station so that it meets its useful life. So while we pulled those out of the CIP, they just became department issues for TJ's department in utilities maintenance. So they'll be part of the FY25 budget. They will be a project. They're just not identified as a capital project because they're really more of a maintenance activity. So it's how they're funded. They'll still come from the water and sewer fund, but they won't be capitalized. And then the last two are Drummer Kellum and it says FY23, but we all know that is DeWitt Street. We recently received our engineer opinion of cost back for both of those projects. And while it is just an engineer's opinion of cost, they were both low, roughly about $200,000. So both of those, we added $200,000 into that project. So those are literally the 5 changes from when we presented to you over the last 2 months. So we felt those were fairly minor changes. And again, we'll know the true cost of these 2 projects when we actually go to bid. But we didn't want to, it looks bad when you're planning a document and you're receiving an engineer's opinion of cost and you don't update the cost to reflect that and then use that in the model. So with that, we'll move over to the model, and then at the very end, I'll ask you for your support. Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
DeWitt Street, is the project you're talking about, is it just for DeWitt Street itself or any of the adjacent streets?
It's just for DeWitt Street itself. DeWitt has a sewer main that runs right down DeWitt Street, and it actually turns down what we call Concrete Alley, which is the spillway where old Elizabeth Lake was, for those of you that have been here for a while. The main turns right down Concrete Alley and then goes under Mill Creek. So we'll probably end up having to replace, we'll have to do something with the manhole in Concrete Alley and maybe a small portion of the main that's just on the other side of Mill Creek. But really, it is for DeWitt Street itself. That's a small portion of the overall project. It won't pick up White Oak Street or Red Oak or any of those. It really is the water and sewer right there along DeWitt Street. Which, while it's not water and sewer, it's related. DeWitt Street is the worst rated street in the city. It definitely needs to be addressed. It's the worst street in the city. But in order to do the street, we have to do the water and sewer because of the condition of those lines, which is partially what leads to the condition of the road. Right.
So the $9 million, you're going to put a revenue bond out for just $9 million?
Actually, I'll let Sabrina make sure I say this right, but I think our first revenue bond would be for $4 million. And then we would go out for the rest later.
Right. We need an additional $4 million for phase 2, the bids that just went out today, because we did receive, we had the $9 million, but we also had $23 million from the state, so that covered the first phase and then part of the second. And we can't do the revenue bonds until we have bids in hand. So we'll do the $4 million that we're short for phase 2, and then we'll do the totality of phase 3, yep. Which I think is like 14 million, something like that. So whatever the difference is, we'll do phase 3 at one time.
But it'll be 2 issues because of the getting bids in hand.
Right.
I think the requirement, because I remember doing this for the water treatment plant or one of the other projects that we did. But you had to have 75% of the project bid. So when you're bidding in phases, it's hard to do 75%. You kind of have to bid the whole phase. So, but for the water plant, I think we bid the whole project. So it made it easier because you had one bid instead of having 3 separate bids.
Okay. So as Wally said, we use the CIP to help determine or help look at where the water sewer rates are. But in addition to the CIP, well, we use the rate model and the CIP together to determine the water and sewer rates. And in addition to the CIP, we also look at and enter into the rate model meters, usage information, meter counts, which predicts revenues. We enter in budget for expenses, debt service, all of that goes into this model. And then we are able to move the CIP projects accordingly to try to help keep the rates as stable as we can. And that's the general idea of how the rates are set in the rate model. There are some assumptions in the model. We key in the FY24 expenditure budget, the total amount of the budget, and then what we have right now for the FY25 budget. As you know, we're still sort of in the budget process, so those numbers could change a little bit, but we're pretty confident that they're fairly close right now. So we have 18.69 million for the FY25, and then we have expense escalation going out 1.5% to 5% per year, depending on the category. So while we might have electricity escalate 3% every year, salaries and benefits may be 5%. So just depending on what the category is. And then we still have the decrease in meter count due to new town center vacancies, which I think we had last time when I came here, and we have seen that decrease, and it's not really changing right now, so we're just still continuing on with that. We escalate the revenue as well. However, revenue doesn't escalate, unfortunately, quite as much as the expenses do, but 1% to 2% per year based on the category. That does not, that's not on the water and sewer, the meter count and the size. That is based on the actual usage and the revenue where we are. So it's not the same, but the other revenues like the water tower leases and things like that. And then for the CIP, as Wally said, we use the FY25 proposed CIP, and those projects are through 2034. And then I will touch on the $9 million in ARPA funding that was removed from the Parkwood project. So when we first received the ARPA funding, the guidance from the Treasury was very strict. And there was a revenue replacement option, but really it was almost so difficult that you couldn't use it, comfortably. But there was an option for water sewer infrastructure that was much easier. And the city did have to select which option they were going to go with. So at the time, because the guidance was the way that it was, and we did have this big water sewer project, the decision was made to use the funding for this project. Well,
One question.
Yes.
Is that grant funding? So does not have to be paid back?
Correct.
Right.
So more than likely, what we've done here is increasing our rates because now we're gonna have to fund $9 million that we would not have.
Exactly.
Correct.
Right. So when there was a discussion about when the new guidance came out, and it made it to where it was much easier to select the revenue replacement option. We could reimburse the general fund for police and fire salaries, which, as you know, you can imagine our police and fire salaries are well over $9 million per year. So if we would reimburse the general fund for those salaries, that would free up money in the general fund to be used for other things, like economic development, the 400 acres of parkland. Those things were, I think, out there, as part of the discussion. So we did do a presentation for council. It was a council decision. They did ask us to look at what it would do to the water sewer rates. So we did take it out of the model, run the model for them, which you'll see the model very similar to what they saw when they made the decision. And it does have an increase. It's not 2.25% every year like it was before. But that's kind of how we got here to where we are now with the funding removed. And then this is just to show the information of, you know, the meter count and the usage and the revenue. The estimate for 2024, we should end with 22,500 meters. It's a little bit lower than 23, and again, we're very conservative on the growth when it comes to meters, but we did take into account the decrease for New River. But you can see the usage increased a little bit and the revenue as well because we did have a rate increase. And then same thing with the sewer. The meter count is a little bit lower, but still the usage and the revenue up due to the rate increase as well. And this is where we get to the rate model panel as it is right now. So what we've done, the green line is what we call the just-in-time increases. So if we were not to determine what the increase would be, the system has determined that these would be the increases needed to sustain the system, to pay the operating expenses, the debt service, to keep our debt ratios where they should be. And you can see while we have a very small increase in 2025, you know, the rates are kind of all over the place, and that's the reason that we had the 2.25% was to keep that from happening. But by the time you get out to 2033, you have an almost 18% rate increase, and then 2034 with 5.27. So what we do is put in the rate increases that we think will help keep it steady, but by the time we get to the out year in 2034, we don't have a giant rate increase. So where that has us right now is still being able to maintain the 2.25 for the next 4 years till we get to FY29. And then as of right now, we would need a 3.25% increase in 29 and 30, and then in 31 we would increase to 3.5 and have 3.5 for the next few years. And of course, we reevaluate this every year and come back, and depending on expenses and revenue and growth, all of that could change. But that's where we would be right now to cover the expenses. You can see the the debt service ratio there. When we get down below 1.5, it turns yellow. It's not so much a good sign, but this keeps our debt service ratio good across. And then the thing to point out about the just-in-time increases is that if you look at the bottom for the average water sewer bill and the minimum bill, if you only do the just-in-time increases, while some years you may have smaller increases, some not at all, by the time you get out to the end, you can see that the bill for the just-in-time ends up higher than if you were to do those small increases every year. Is there any questions on that slide?
And I think this differed, I'm going from memory, but I think this differed slightly when we showed council the removal of the 9 million. I think 29 was actually 3.75.
Yeah.
So these are actually, when we rekey the proposed CIP and, all of our escalators, it's actually slightly better than what we showed council, just taken away based on last year's model run.
And I think we ran that model for them, I think back in like August maybe. So now, of course, we have, better full year estimates and a budget for next year. So it is actually a little bit better.
So what is the average impact for a household? I mean, $4 or $5 a month, $3 a month?
Well, if you look at from 24, so if you look at just the minimum bill, the total, I don't know if this is right there, 5472. So you can see when we go with the 2.25, it'll go from 5472 to 5595. So, and you can see that as it escalates, this is where Sabrina was saying by the time you get to 34.
So the average bill up there is going up $2 a month.
Yes.
Each year.
Each year, yes.
in round numbers.
Yes,
For water and sewer.
for water and sewer.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So you have to worry about, sanitation and.
That's
stormwater.
correct. It does not take sanitation, stormwater, or anything else into it.
That's what I'm
That
saying.
is correct. The utility bill
Yeah.
has all of that on there.
Right, yeah.
So
So
we're just
that bill
focused on-
itself may be more, but.
That is correct.
Well, Randy and I were part of all that discussion when it first came about.
That's
I
right.
think we're the only old folks still here. But the reason for it was so it'd be gentle on the public.
Yeah.
Even a $5 raise on somebody's on a fixed income, they see that as a high, that hurts them.
Yeah.
So that's why this was all developed to begin with. My question is, I see where you're showing you're doing what, 4 years, then going to 3.25?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible, just go based on what I was just saying, to do that earlier in just a smaller rate so that people don't see that even $5 a month rate, that it's really only a couple dollars a month building up to that?
I think you could do, I mean, certainly if you do a little more sooner, it pushes out the increases further.
Yeah.
But we, like Sabrina said, we update this every year. So you're looking at a snapshot. And I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, we didn't do a 2.25 increase at all.
Right.
So the model looked good enough at that point. Of course, that's where the 9 million came into play.
So it was the-
So the model looked good enough at that point that we didn't do a rate increase that year, and I don't remember which year it was. But if we'd have done that 2.25 raise, who knows what the impact would have been now.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm recommending what we're looking at. I would say continuing with the 2.25, especially when we're talking 4 or 5 years out.
Because you don't know what it's gonna be.
Right.
Really.
As we adjust and move projects, we
Things will
can change some of the out years. We do our best with the crystal ball that we have, but if we were talking next year, it was calling for 3.25. I think that would be a different discussion. But being that it's 4 or 5 years out, I think we continue to monitor that as it gets
So
closer.
this plan's been in place how many years now? About 8 years now? Is it?
I don't think it's quite that long. I was
At least
thinking
5.
5 or
At
6.
least 5 or 6. And
Yeah.
it's worked out pretty good
It has.
every year. Yeah, based on what you were just saying, some years, like last year, didn't have to do it at all.
Yep.
But I don't think you've ever gone over the 2.5.
We haven't since we implemented that philosophy.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But if you look at, others around us
Oh, yeah.
are seeing 5 and 8%, and they're already higher than us on the minimum bill. So
but
it's
we used to be that way though. We were
did.
one of them.
we were.
And that's what started, because people were complaining, because it went up, 22% one year?
It went double digits
I know,
2 years in a
I
row.
know it went pretty high, and that's what started all this, so.
And that's
I
where,
wanna say-
that's where you were getting those, the elderly or the folks that don't use the 2,000 gallons. and say,
Exactly.
why am I paying
Yeah.
what this guy's doing for why am I, that's what the discussion came up earlier with that, so.
That's right.
And plus the grants that we may get once in a while that will keep the taxes down and bills down. Kinda puts a different aspect on that.
Well, and there's, we're watching very closely the grants that become available. There is a federal infrastructure bill. The problem is right now it's, when they do that, they say kind of specifically what it can be used for. And right now, one of the big emphasis, because we've talked about this several times, is lead service line identification and removal. And while we've been working through our identification, we haven't found any, which is great for us. Means we wouldn't have to offset that expense, but also means we can't go get that money either.
Yeah.
So we do try to identify funding that becomes available, but I've been here for over 20 years now, and before the ARP money and Senator Lazar bringing us $20 million, the only other grant funding I had gotten in the entire time I had been here was the American Reinvestment, the ARA funding, American Reinvestment Act of 2009. we got $3 million. Half of it was principal forgiveness and the other half was a no interest loan. But in the 20 years I've been here, that was the only grant we had qualified for. Kind of fall in, for water and sewer, we fall in that, you know, if you're a smaller provider, then it's easier to go get grant funding. But when you're as large as we are, we fall out of those categories where we're eligible for a lot of grants. So we do watch it pretty carefully.
Yeah, because I imagine there's timelines that you have to submit to get the grants. I'm sure you all have that already
Yes.
set up that, hey, it's time for us to submit and see what happens.
Yes, sir. And we have, right now, Roy's tracking 3 or 4 grants that we've applied for. Pat on the stormwater side is tracking 3 or 4 million, several $1 million grants. So while we may not be eligible on the water and sewer side, we go after everything we can identify. And of course, we have Parks and Rec, so Part F grants for Parks and Rec. So we're very good about trying to go leverage money,
Sure.
but for water and sewer, it's just, you know, I hate to say it, we just don't qualify for a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is just the next slide that shows the fund balance. We have that target fund balance that in addition to covering operating expenses and maintaining debt service ratio, we're also trying to make sure that we don't spend fund balance down too quickly. So this just shows that the just-in-time, it shows the difference between the just-in-time increases and the plan that we're on now. So as you can see, we're just making sure that we're meeting that target fund balance all the way out through 34. And as Wally said, next steps would be mayor and council comments or additions. And then we still, we have the budget book will be delivered to council on April 2nd. So we still have more budget discussions to be had. And then, am I taking your slide?
No,
This
keep
will be
going.
adopted, the CIP. I was thinking it was the rate model, but we would ask for support for the rate model and the CIP would be, the rate model, the fees would be adopted with the FY25 budget in June.
So go one more slide.
Okay.
So what we're asking is that you support the water and sewer portion of the CIP. The full CIP, the full capital improvement plan will be sent to council. Matter of fact, I submitted it today, so it will go out to city council for Tuesday night's meeting. We'll give a brief overview, a little bit of what you saw tonight, where we related to council goals and how the total number of projects and total dollar value and what's actually in FY25 that'll be in the budget. For the whole CIP, we'll go to them Tuesday night for their review. And then, typically if there's questions about specific projects or projects they would like to see moved out or moved up, then we would take those back to them. So what we're asking from you tonight is just to recommend approval of the water and sewer draft projects that we've submitted based on the water and sewer rate model that you've seen. And, if there's any requests from council or changes, we would bring this back to you.
Well, then I would make any recommendations, a motion to accept the plan, the CIP as discussed here. Do we have any discussions on that?
I think it's important that if anybody be watching on GT and understand the process that you guys have been going through and how well, not bragging on you, but I am bragging on you, how well you guys have really been done since we went to this model. Because the price of everything out there, especially has gone up. And you're still maintaining within the budget that you guys have put forth and we approved. So that's basically what we're doing today is the same thing, is continuing that process because it's working. And that's, I think it's important they understand that, it's going to increase, but at a small rate versus 20% at some rate if you had to. So that's why I would make the recommendation that we do approve to council what's been presented.
All right, so I have a motion on the floor to accept it. Do I have a second?
Any questions from you, Randy?
Not for this board.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion that we accepted it, seconded, motion approved.
Vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, all in favor? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye, motion stands. Good, it's approved. All right. I take it that's the end of that for, all right, with everything that's been discussed, it's not too bad for time-wise, considering we covered 5 projects. During our open discussion time now, is there anything that we have not covered that you'd like to cover? Or
I have
re-emphasized?
A couple of things that I would like to point out. One of the things that we've been asked to do as a staff by the manager is to prepare the CIP sooner. The timeline we've been working off of is we generally start in October with a request for new projects from all of the departments because engineering supports all the departments in the city. And then we pull that information together and go through reviews over kind of the November and December timeframes. We start trying to finalize and iron out project and cost updates in the January, February timeframe so that we have, generally a draft CIP for Sabrina to key into the budget, because not only does she key in water and sewer, she keys in general fund and all the others. In the generally the March timeframe, which only leaves, April, May, June to get something adopted. So we've been asked to, because the CIP is such a large part of that, to start sooner. So I kind of say that to say you just supported this. Come July 1, we'll probably be talking CIP again for next year, next budget year. So we'll end up probably having to do our call for projects right around the July, August timeframe, and then try to accelerate that. And our goal is to have the meeting we just had with you tonight in the December timeframe or January timeframe. Okay. So we will, I'm just kind of, we've been on this timeframe, starting in basically December for the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to be talking CIP. And now we're going to be doing that probably between, September and December instead of December to March. So we're going to try to accelerate that for next year. So I say that to say, don't be surprised when we're back to you in a couple of months talking CIP again, and you're saying, didn't we just do this? And then along with that, we showed you screenshots from the model. Roy and I have been working on the system development fee model, or the system development fee study that we have to do every 5 years. As part of this update, we're going to end up with a model that is very similar to what you just saw. So not only will we be able to model what the CIP and the expenses do for the rates, we will be able to do that on the development side as well. So we've actually seen a preliminary version of that model with the draft CIP plugged into it. And we still have assets to go through. We still have capacities to supply. So we're not done yet. But on the initial review, what we've found is that our system development fees are tracking very close to what we already have. Matter of fact, I think the water was less than $50 apart from where we are right now. So, which shows that, the methodology that we've been using is supported by the model that they're putting together. So Roy and I will continue to work on that. That is something that will be presented to this board before we move forward, asking council to, adopt or change fees or anything like that. And historically, what we've done is we've also put together a stakeholder committee so that we talk directly with the builders and developers also. So we'll be moving forward with that in probably the next month or two. I think we're close enough to say that that's probably where we'll be. But in that preliminary model, it actually, as they key the information in, it's actually very close to where we are right now. So there's, it just shows the documents that we're using and the way we're breaking out our projects is a very sound method. And they actually analyze 2 methods when they do that. But we'll present all of that to you so you see it.
I can't wait to see the details on that one.
No, thank goodness for these models that do a lot of the, once the input is placed in the models, I mean, it kicks out the information you need quickly. And
It's getting it built right. That's
Yeah.
as long as it's built right.
Exactly. It's only as smart as the input. Yeah.
That's right.
So
All
I
right,
was
do
just
we have- I'm
curious,
sorry,
yeah,
go
one more
ahead.
thing. I just noticed on our planning permitting update that we got us development for the corner of Drummer Pelham Road and Ramsey Road. Now is that part of this water line extension, and what about sewer?
That end is
Because that's satellite annexation.
that will be satellite annexation. The way they would serve that is similar to how we served Harvest Meadows, which is the subdivision that's on Drummer Kellum. It's 190 lots or so. Also known as Country View. Country View.
Yeah.
There's a little small apartment building on it.
Yeah.
So on Wassa Water, on Wassa supplies the water, we collect at Onwassa's rate and we remit back to Onwassa. So we actually collect at their rate. So that is different than we do Country Club, which is legal because
Okay, because you'd always heard you couldn't charge, everybody
the
had to pay the
difference
same.
is the law actually allows you to charge different for a satellite annexation, provided the costs are different.
Right.
And because Onwassa's supplying the water, the costs are different. But the city would provide sewer service, which is how we've got the annexation. They would come back through the Country View lift station, and they would come into the commons. Yes, sir.
So the
So-
lift station's okay?
I was speaking with Tidewater engineers yesterday, actually, last night. We were actually talking about that. We need to analyze the commons lift station because at some point it won't be okay. And we just gotta figure out at what point that is. And there's actually money programmed in the CIP to study that basin and look at the commons lift station for upgrades in the future. The good thing is also in the CIP, which would be covered by service area fees, is an extension from North Rain Town Center across 17 to Drummer Kellum Road, Drummer Kellum 17 intersection.
John Deere.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would tie in and go into, Mr. Brown actually owns a commercial tract that's not developed. It would extend up into that area. So one of the things that Jason at Tidewater and I discussed is that affords us the opportunity to look at the best way to bring development in that area back into the city. But Country View Lift Station was always planned as a regional lift station. We recognized that there was a lot of farmland in the Ramsey Road, Drummer Kellum area. And there's still a lot left out there. We recognize that was a development potential. So we did plan for that. But we still have to get it through our existing infrastructure. So it could come with upgrades to the existing infrastructure. But that extension gives us 2 routes to analyze.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything else? All right, hearing none, our next meeting is 5:30 PM on Thursday, April 11th, 2024. That pretty much concludes our business. If there's no other business, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned.